The Aussie NFL Fantasy Show would like to acknowledge the traditional land owners and the leaders past, present and emerging of Ngunnawal, Ngambri and Darawal countries where we are working from today. This always was, and always will be, Aboriginal land.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
Matty C.
James Conner's behind the dowel. Don't look behind the dowel. And I look like I'm wearing my dad's shirt. Totally like McCaffrey. It always looks like he's wearing his dad's gear. Fantastic. I'm glad that you've still got the, that luxury of being allowed to lick rhinos still in the back pocket.
Aussie?
And then T. Higgins. Like, these are just three guys, man, Jod. If you left him in a room alone with, he would totally just lick them all.
NFL?
The gap between Connor and Montgomery is closing, by the way. I'm really happy about this.
Fantasy.
Oh, give me a scoop of the Heebies to go with my Jeebies on that one. Mate, I'm all kinds of happy about that. You're like, oh, fucking predictable Matty. Yep. Always doing the same fucking things. I'm so disappointed. I really wanted to smack that ass, son. I'm going to go with old Goggles McGee.
So we're into our sell highs.
I think this is going to be a wildly fun part because there's some dudes this year who have been off the charts.
Yeah, we get to tear some shreds off some people. But It's not so much about that. It's like, in what I talk about these guys, I bring up how good they have been so far. Like, we're not talking about people as our sell highs saying they're bad fantasy players. We're just saying we feel like these are probably guys you could trade off what they have done so far because we're not thinking that what they've done is 100% sustainable moving forward. So, all right. So, again, I've got a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver.
Got it.
And for my first sell high at quarterback, I'm going to take a shot here at the quarterback 4 on the season, one Joseph Burrow. Now, no Jamar Chase for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we've seen what that looks like against the Browns on Monday Night Football. His O-line is atrocious, and without being able to throw slants to Jamar, I'm worried about Burrow in the short term. I'm not saying this is a full worry for the entire season because he's going to get Jamar Chase back. I'm sure he'll work it out in certain matchups, but the quarterback 4 tag, I just don't think, I just don't think that he should be there in terms of what I can see him doing for the rest of the year. I do worry that they're going to run the ball a bit more because of the fact they don't have Jamar Chase. Teams are going to probably throw their best defensive player on Higgins now. So you haven't got that 3-headed monster at wide receiver. You've got the 2. So I am a little bit worried about Burrow moving forward. I watched a lot of that game on Monday night and it just didn't look great. Yeah. And like his O-line can't sustain him. So it's not like he can, have a bit of extra time there to work out who he was going to go to. So it's going to be a lot of dump offs to Mixon probably, which just doesn't move the offense forward as quickly as what he was doing. Yep. And less bulk plays, less huge plays in fantasy. So I just think moving forward, he's probably not a bad person to try and move. I'm not saying you have to. I just think he's a sell high target.
I think he's the perfect candidate at quarterback for this because, he does have some really cool defenses coming up, and he's shown he's actually the perfect. I'm playing against a tough defense. Oh, I'm not scoring so much. Oh, I'm playing against a bad defense. Oh, I'm scoring more than 20. He is the copy of how you do that against. A good defense can work him out, and a bad defense just lets him run wild. His volume is kind of my only thing that I kind of like about him. He continues to throw 35 times a game minimum. But, it's a big drop-off going from 2 games of 30 points on water down to 14, and it all happened in junk time. So, this is the thing, junk time points score the same, and he could just Bortles his way. You know what I mean? That's kind of the only thing I'm nervous about. But I like the idea. Make it someone else's problem. Trade him the fuck away.
Yeah, and you could get a good return for him. That's the thing. I know people will probably see the Jamar Chase thing, but they're going to see the quarterback 4. They're going to see the Joe Shiesty. He's got a lot of swagger, and people like him in fantasy. And what you just said, he's still throwing it a lot. So people are going to see that and want to try and probably upgrade their quarterback position. And I think they see Burrow as that high end quarterback. So I think you could actually get a good return for him at that quarterback 4 price tag.
Yeah. I think he's the kind of guy who, because I can see the trajectory of opportunity against bad defenses later in the year, where if he isn't just in junk time, they're not going to be able to stop it. So there's kind of the part of me that thinks I've got a 1-6 team. Maybe that's the team. I'm just going to make that trade anyway and give the guy something and just see if I can get some points out of him in a low risk situation. But if I'm in a higher risk situation where I'm really actually having a bit of a go in that league, yeah, that's the perfect move. I think you're only knowingly going after Joe Burrow if you're dazzled by the quarterback 4 thing, or you're just fucking curious like me.
100%.
Because I don't know, the part of it that's like, run towards the fire. I don't know what's wrong with me. So I can't talk down the Burrow thing. I think he's the perfect candidate for this segment. I went way up to a running back who was killing it. And I just kind of wonder how this will go, because in PPR and standard, Ramondre Stevenson is the 7th running back. And I just think that's wild. And I just can't see a way that this guy is. So he's rostered in 94% of leagues. I'd love to see the 6% of leagues he's not in. And 81% started. That sounds about right. And he's got some good pluses, right? Never had less than 10 points since he really kind of took over a bit more of a role after that week 2 game in Pittsburgh. 5 or more targets every game since that stage 2, and not less than 10 attempts in any of those games. So there's lots of good stuff to hang your hat on. But he has no games against bottom 10 defenses against the running back now until week 14. So if you've made hay off him, he's going to need serious volume, and it's going to be like 2 yards, a cloud of dust, and if he falls forward into an end zone, or you're going to need him to be receiving a lot of passes. But Harris is still getting 40% of snaps, still getting 10 plus carries a game, and Harris is still getting a couple of targets. It just makes me nervous.
To prove the worth of this sort of segment, I've mentioned on the pod earlier, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I went out and made it my mission to pick up Ramondre in as many leagues as possible. Ended up with him in 5, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Which was just amazing. A lot of them were Chase Edmonds for him, which obviously has worked out quite well.
Yeah.
Running back 7 on the season. Again, it was just sort of looking at the data and just seeing that turn. This is before, obviously, I got in front of the whole Damian Harris injury. But there was a turn happening already. Like I just thought if he could get to anywhere near 50-50 with Damian Harris, I thought he would be worth it, because he's the passing down guy. So anytime the Pats are behind, he's probably getting all of it. But if he's getting 50% of the rushes with that, I feel like that's very, very valuable in a run-first team. So I just thought that was a huge opportunity. I didn't ever think it would be all of a sudden quarterback 7. I just thought it was a value at the time. And this is why you're probably right. Like running back 7 is probably too high for him, because now you're looking at it going, he's running back 7, but he actually is still in the committee. And, if they are in front, he's only going to get half the rushing attempts, maybe less, if they all of a sudden go back to Harris being the lead guy. So there's definitely question marks about him. I did actually trade him in 1 league for most at last week, which I'm not exactly thrilled at a week on removed. But again, I thought all the matchups for most at moving forward the next 4 or 5 weeks are just amazing.
Yeah.
And like you said, I had a little bit concerned in terms of what Ramondre had coming up, and obviously whatever Harris was going to do to his value. So again, I'm not saying that you have to move him.
No.
Be strategic about who you move him to. But I completely agree with you. He's definitely a huge candidate for regression in the second half of the year.
Yeah, and that's all I'm aiming at. I'm not saying that he might not be productive and useful, but I think he's just going to have to work damn hard to do it. I just think there's guys you could feel more comfortable about that you could get with this Ramondre Stevens capital.
In Content League, I also traded DeAndre Swift for Ramondre Stevenson and DeAndre Hopkins. Looking like probably trade of the year so far.
Fuck me. It's like a robbery. But so at the moment, if someone came to you with saying, well, let's say you're in a league and you just saw someone just trade Ramondre straight out for James Conner, because I think that could happen. Whose side do you think wins that? I think Connor's side wins handsomely, even though it probably wouldn't look like it on paper.
It wouldn't, and I don't think that would be the general consensus. I think everyone would actually go, I haven't seen James Conner play. He's injured, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they'd see all these stats from the last 3 or 4. People get very tunnel visioned in the stats in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and they don't really think about the future as much as the past. So, I agree with you.
If I'm the Connor side of that deal, I think This is a man-jot term he said last week. Like, this is 1,000 IQ thinking. I'd be so chuffed with that. I just feel like I've won that trade.
Yep,
And
exactly.
probably 8/10 of the league would be like, you're fucked.
Especially because what you probably gave up initially to have Ramondre in the first place to then go get a guy who was getting drafted in the second round initially, who the only reason he doesn't have the value he does is because of injury.
Yeah, he's been out of sight.
Else.
That's all. He's just you haven't seen him. That's all it is. And people have got short memories.
I'll give myself a pat on the back. 2-0 for my fantasy AIDS player of the week.
What a great photo. Just look at that cheesy grin.
It was dead set like a monsoon that day. It was insane. Oh. Yeah, pretty much. I was doing slides like Justin Fields straight across my belly.
Mate, I would pay good money to watch that. Actually, yeah, that's what we've got to do. Is we've got to get a Aussie NFL fantasy slip and slide day going on. That would be great.
A few beers into me, I'll do anything.
Mate, careful. I might take you up on it.
I would say he probably only just made it past the line that I would consider being a success.
Looking around going, can I get a program over here? Who's this Dorch guy?
What a torch.
It's fun to say. I'll give him that.
Yeah, every time Russ throws an incomplete pass, the Denver Broncos fans, they just go incomplete.
Well, I'm taking on someone very similar who's very high at running back. I'm taking down Josh Jacobs, who I often talked about. And again, this is really more to talk about how good he has been this year. It's been amazing. He's the Cinderella story of the year so far. He's on an absolute tear, but I just don't believe it can be sustained. Here's his average against defenses in the top 10 against running back, 9.07. Here's his average against bottom 20 teams, 26.4. Three of his last 4 matchups of the fantasy year are against the first, second, and fourth best run D. So he could really hurt you in the fantasy playoffs when you need him most.
Yeah. Yeah, look, and I think this is where you've got to be looking at that. If you have ridden the Josh Jacobs train, people are going to be tripping over you to buy him off you, right?
Tunnel vision again, like I mentioned.
60% of your league are just going to be like, that guy's fucking awesome. And they're right.
Back 6. And because he's had some massive games, like just ones that have won your weeks. People remember that. And I just think people get, like I said, tunnel vision, and they just see the last few weeks and they see the 36 in there and the 24 a couple of weeks before that, and they just don't even think about
34,
what's coming.
30, 36 in a row with a bye wedged in. Fuck me. That's some scoring.
It is. And again, this isn't to try and tear shreds off the guy. He's been absolutely amazing. And he was this guy that I actually wasn't against him this year because I actually thought he was getting almost too undervalued. I wasn't someone here spruiking like he was this enormous pickup for me either. No. But he was a guy who was...
You always thought his ceiling was capped, right?
His draft position to me was actually getting pushed further and further by consensus.
Yeah.
That I actually thought it's either right or a bit too low. So those kind of guys I don't normally end up with anyway, the ones that I feel like are almost too well placed. Or, by draft time, I thought he was definitely a little bit too low, but in the end, I didn't end up with any of him. But I just think in general, everyone just thought with this new regime, they might have gone to Brendan Bolden a bit more, and they might have been, looking at Zamir White, just like it would have been, trying to turn him over. They didn't obviously extend him. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option and, all this other crap. He was playing in the Hall of Fame game for too long, apparently, for everyone, and so it just turned everyone off him. But end,
there's even talk of Amir Abdullah taking some work off me. Like, Amir Abdullah? We're invoking Amir Abdullah against this guy. That's like having a voodoo doll out and poking safety pins into him. Like, what are we doing?
Absolutely. That was huge news in the preseason. So in the end, you just don't have, that just proves you don't have to listen to everything that you hear in the preseason. And the guy is very talented. That's just how it is. And he still doesn't get a huge deal of passing work. But the fact is, what he's shown me this year is I always used to feel like he was a little bit too touchdown dependent. But the fact he's getting all these yards in the middle of the field, it just proves to me that he's worked on his game and he's very good between the tackles, and he isn't just a touchdown dependent guy anymore. So that's very good for him. That, like, again, this wasn't a tear down Josh Jacobs segment. This was just, I don't think it can be sustained what he's doing right now. And if you can get a running back 6 value for him in a trade, I'd just please go for it.
Do it immediately, yeah. And that's the same as Ramondre at 7. It's like, what world did people drafting, if you told them, okay, so you've managed to get Stevenson and Jacobs in the draft, and you would have got them later than you'd expect anyway, but you say, oh yeah, but by half season that's like running with 6 and 7. They're going to send you off a head injury assessment. Like, yeah,
like who would you rather?
I wonder what you're drinking.
Like, who would you rather, Josh Jacobs at running back 6 or Dalvin Cook at running back 12?
Yeah, 100%. This is a great segue because my sell high is Dalvin Cook.
Is it really?
It is, but for no surprising reasons, right? So, in full PPR, he's 13th, and this is a great segue. So sorry to cut off your Josh Jacobs, but I feel like this is the same argument all over again, right? So that he's performed really, really neatly in the last couple of weeks against really, really decently, running back friendly matchups, and he gets Washington next. So comes off the bye, gets Arizona and just kills them, right? Because fair enough, Arizona can't stop a bleeding nose. And then you get Washington this week. Their front's actually pretty good. Buffalo. Oh, actually, there's nothing about Buffalo that isn't really fucking good. Dallas. Yeah, their front is really fucking good. The Jets. You can't run on the Jets. It's just, that's the next 4. So if you can get anything for Cook now, you might as well. He doesn't do anything until the playoffs, and the goal is here you just sell him to someone who's really on the fringe and just watch them fall out, so then he's not in your fantasy playoffs.
There you go. I'll be honest, he's probably someone I didn't take a too deep a look at him. I've had him in about 3 leagues, including Astro, so it's one that I definitely am probably just closing my eyes and praying he makes a few big plays. But I will say, like, in terms of the arrow pointing up, he definitely seems to be on a good trajectory. Like, he was struggling earlier in the year and sitting at about running back 30 odd. And he definitely seems to be getting, Madison's not really cutting into it too much. He seems to pilfer. Like, I think he's pilfered a couple of touchdowns this year, but in terms of usage, he just hasn't been there. It's just a full workload for Delvin this year. So in general, like, he's so talented and he's getting, a huge line share of the work. I just think in general, I'm happy to just keep running with that. But like you said, he's got bad matchup, and that's what you got to look for in this. So I wouldn't have any issue if you're going to get a Delvin Cook haul in a trade.
You probably would now.
Yeah, because he's actually playing well. And like I said, into the top 12 in running back. So I think you're going to get a full Delvin Cook trade in, like that you're going to get the haul back for him, then I've got no issue with it.
All right, well, there's 2 things I want to add here real quick. If I sold you a guy who just played 3 bottom 10 run defenses in a row, scored 26, 15, and 25, and scored in those 4 touchdowns, you go, fucking yeah. But you know what? Coming into this week, after his week 7 bye, he had the exact same amount of touchdowns as Alexander Madison. And he's now about to play 4 of the top 10 running defenses. And, as the team who've now just also gone out and spent capital to get an extra piece in their passing armory as well. So I can see things are not going to be so rosy for him. And we've seen what it's like when the only other top sort of 15 running defenses he's played against, he's hit double figures by parts of a point and missed double figures. And I guess kind of tells me all you need to know.
There was also a game against the Dolphins a few weeks ago when I think halfway through the 3rd quarter, he was like 6 for 11. It was something horrendous. And I'm like, this guy has to be injured. And he wasn't. And then all of a sudden, he just broke out like a 60-yard touchdown or something. Like, it was just absolutely
all in a play. Yeah.
Completely changed his entire day. And I guess, like, you can see that as a negative or a positive in a way. You can be like, all right, if the glass half full there, that even against a really tough rush D, all it takes is one play. So you could have a terrible day for 95% of it, and he's the kind of guy that could break out a massive play. So that's a good thing, but at the same time, it is also bad that he's sitting there at 6 for 11 in a game halfway through a 3rd quarter, because, that could happen again. And then if he doesn't get the breakout play, what does he finish on? 30 yards. What?
It tells you really what the offensive line's capable of when they're actually against a defense that's got a front. And he has not been able to do it on his own because the offensive line's not as good as you think. So that's why I would be now. I've sold him in a league once already this year, and I'll be selling him again.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
Oh God, this just This episode has to be one of the worst ones.
That's just me slapping in sunscreen, mate.
I just feel like I'm there. I'm not there for a rectal exam. It's there for just, just a quick check.
Mate, we can always schedule you for that. It's just going to cost some.
Aussie.
Here's an update. I think there's 2 seagulls having sex next to my car. This is the weirdest shit I've ever seen.
So film it and create a new platform called Only Goals.
NFL.
Yeah, I'm not even believing that. I'm sorry, but I'm not even believing that.
Fantasy.
This is the weirdest fucking... I'm sorry, I'm rattled.
Oh my gosh. Just went from bad to worse. Oh god.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
How much of this will Matty cut out, by the way?
I don't know, probably.
This is
Sorry, just got AIDS then.
All right, you got a wide receiver to wrap this up, brother.
I do, mate. You won't be too happy with this with your background, but it's Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And he's one that I was obviously quite proud of in terms of my preseason calls and drafted him a couple of leagues. Again, another Cinderella story in general, but it's definitely slowing down big time. His average in the first 3 games, 18.23. His average since, 7.36. So I believe it's time to cash in on this guy while you still can, because I still believe there's an aura of the fact that he's wide receiver 15 and he's having, I guess, a year that better than everyone expected. So I think he could still be a very good piece in a trade. I think people still see him as that. But I think that's gonna wear off. You see him start falling into 20, 25 range in wide receiver. People are just gonna see him as a flex at best asset. So I think right now you can still see him as a wide receiver 1 or 2. So I think now is the time to probably turn him into someone else. Again, it doesn't sound like you're too much in disagreement, because it just seems to be, I keep talking about trends and whether someone's pointing up or down. And at the moment, unfortunately, Christian Kirk is just pointing down at the moment.
See, now the only thing I would complain about here is that I think, so you're getting him on the back end of where he's just had 6 weeks where he's played, 7 weeks where he's played 6 of the top 10 passing defenses against wide receiver for fantasy points. And he gets Las Vegas this week, who are, okay, admittedly a better matchup for a wide receiver. But then after that, there is not another hurdle until week 16. They are all just shite passing defenses. Let me roll them off. Kansas City, can throw anything you want on them. Baltimore, it doesn't matter what position you play against Baltimore. You do all right. Detroit, Tennessee, it's great to be a receiver against Tennessee. Dallas, again, don't run against them. You pass against them. That's 6 in a row. So I kind of feel like you're just getting him on the tail of end of where the hardship. And he'd probably be one where I really could have wrapped him into buy low. But I think it's tough to get people to see that. So you'd have to be like me, completely immersed in Jags fandom to want to do this. But I've just sat out that tough period with Christian Kirk in Astro League, which is a 16-team league. In that league, he's wide receiver 16. So he's actually still a wide receiver 1. Even though he hasn't felt like it for 5 weeks. But I know that opportunity is coming back. I know that it's coming back. I can taste that it's coming back.
He might even be someone that you don't sell right now, you sell after 1 good game. He might be someone who goes and has a good game against the Raiders this week, and then people start thinking, oh my God, is he back? That might even be the opportunity you need. I like I said, I'm just still a little bit worried. I still think the value might be there now to make a move, but again, it just depends what situation you're in. And I just do worry about the way trends are looking. And you are right; he's going to get better matchups moving forwurt. So if you own
Kirk now and you want to trade him, I am not going to argue against that, because I get it. You are butt hurt. You have just eaten 5 shit sandwiches back to back to back to back to back to back. I'm not going to argue with that. So and would it make you feel bristling with excitement that there's a likelihood he's going to turn that around all of a sudden when you've just seen that for more than a month? No. So look, I'm not going to chastise the guy who sells Christian Kirk and he's getting out of a bad deal. I'm not going to chastise that guy. And I'm not going to advocate go get him, because I understand that's a crazy argument. And you'd have to be this guy here to think it's a good argument. It's not going to be everyone's I get it.
He might even be a watch for a week to see how he goes against that matchup, because if he does nothing against a good matchup, then it's really panic stations.
Oh, totally. I feel like I kind of need to set some sort of line here where I show you how much I love Christian Kirk. Maybe it's not this week, maybe it's next week, where I show you how much I like Christian Kirk and I put like a number on it and we just water bet the number. And you can just be like out. Because I don't know, I kind of feel like this is where I'm at with him, is that I'm crazy enough to think this is a good idea. And I understand most people aren't. But that's kind of why it'd be a cool hill to die on.
Sounds good, mate. It sucks, though, because I don't want to be the guy going against Christian Kirk because he was a guy I really liked in the preseason and I really liked his game.
He was
and
so right about him.
Great. So, again, it's just one of those things. I'm looking at it from a pure fantasy side and I just see a guy that's sort of on a downward spiral that I think still has a bit of value that could be juiced out.
I mean, that said, too, he's still getting a ton of targets. There's really only been one game he's had less than 5. You don't ever want to see your top receiver only getting 5 targets, though. But, I mean, he's got a steady diet of 9, 10, 7, 12. There's a lot of that in his history. So the targets are even there against the bad defenses. So when it's there, against the tough defenses. So when it's there against the bad defenses, I feel like it's just room to make hay. But I understand, again, totally not everyone's going to think that. It's going to be a hard sell to make to people to convince them that this is the time to buy Christian Kirk. I think people would hear me say that and go, you're a fucking peanut. But it kind of makes me feel like I should be the guy to go out and buy him somewhere and show that it's a worthwhile thing. And I mean, I've got him in the league I care about the most, and I've sat it out for 5 weeks. So I'm going to sit it out for the rest of the way now. And that'll be me sticking my neck out on Christian Kirk.
Sounds good.
All right. Now that I've done that, my last one. This little light I've got here keeps falling off, but I can't have the light behind me on it. It doesn't work in here. So I need to make that more permanent. It's fallen off like 6 times. How much do you like people who used to be Titans, Tay?
Absolutely wonderful, mate.
Well, when they're not Titans anymore, they're just dead to you because they've gone to places you don't give a fuck about.
Or
do you still kind of carry the torch?
I kind of don't. It's so weird you bring this up, right? I was watching AJ Brown score those 3 touchdowns, and a huge part of me is like, I feel like I should care about this more, but I just don't. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm fine with the guy going and getting paid and going and doing it because the Titans in the end made a business decision and they didn't want to pay him. So in the end, I can't hate the guy because he got what he deserved and got paid over there. And we just made a business decision and moved on. So I really don't dislike the guy. I'm happy for him. I loved watching him as a Titan, and I hope he does well on the Eagles. And I know people might say that and you might think I'm bullshitting, but honestly, I really don't care. I'm fine with it. Yeah. If he goes shit, I'm okay. If he goes great, I'm okay. It just doesn't bother me at all.
So this is what I call A-Rob fever. Do you think I give much of a fuck about what I'm saying, Rob?
Yeah. No, exactly.
Okay, so the reason I ask is because it's AJ Brown, right? And so he's owned everywhere and he started pretty much everywhere. God, I'd love to see what that 6% of leagues he's not started in look like. And he's a top 6 or 7 wide receiver, depending on if you're playing PPR or the old non-PPR.
So I didn't play him, just to cut in there, I didn't play him. So there's a 6% of the league, but that was the Astro Champions League where it is just
the 6-team league, right?
6-team league.
But it's deep. You got to start 3 receivers and 3 plus a flex.
Yeah, it was
3 running backs plus a flex. So there's some depth to it, but hard to trust. I mean, he's getting a high snap percentage. He's had a couple of games where it's been as low as 75%, and they've been pretty, not worthwhile to continue throwing kind of games because they've kind of been over. But his yards per catch have also never been less than 13 yards per catch. He's only had less than 5 receptions just once. So there's all these great things. We go, oh, fucking look at that. Look at this bugger. No wonder he's wide receiver 6 or 7. But 32% of his entire fantasy points didn't even exist until 5 days ago.
Yep.
He caught 6 balls. That's his second most receptions for the season. His upcoming schedule, he plays 5 of the top 10 passing defenses. Houston this week on the Thursday night on the short week. Don't love that. He also gets number 2, Indianapolis, number 9, Green Bay, number 6, New York Giants, and number 5, Chicago Bears between here and the end of the fantasy regular season. Yeah, he gets Washington and Tennessee in there. They're great, but that's only 2 out of the rest of the season. I think you get a great haul for him. I think you have to sell him. I think you have to. Don't you?
Yeah. And it's just one of those things, right, where, what his values come from how good the Eagles have been. You know, they're sitting there at 7-0. Like, do the wheels fall off a little bit for them in the second half? I don't 100% know. I said this earlier in the year, I have been very, very happy of what I've seen of Jalen Hurts, and it would make me way more confident in AJ Brown moving forward than I would have been at the start of this year. AJ Brown was a little bit of a fade for me in the preseason just because I didn't know what a run-first offense would look like for AJ Brown. I know we just saw it at Tennessee, but again, even at Tennessee, he was so hot and cold. It was hard to really trust him. And again, right now, I can see what you mean because it's coming off a huge performance, and he only had 6 catches. Like, he could easily have a couple of bus games coming up, and that's just who he is. So if you get in front of that, like trading him as a top 5 receiver or whatever he is right now.
Yeah, he's right there. He's like 6 and 7, depending on your format.
Unbelievable value. So I can't say I hate it because I don't think I've ever really hated on anyone for trading or for or against, trading away or trading for AJ Brown. I feel like he's always a target, but then he's always someone you could easily trade away to because he's always 2 seconds away from a bus game. That's just the way he's been.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the concerning thing for me too is there's all that great positive stuff, but once you look at the negatives, you go, wow, he's really built out of straw, isn't he? So, yeah, I was just really surprised once I dug into the numbers. And, I mean, I'm sitting there eating my little can of tuna, looking down these players at lunch today going, am I reading this right? Because it just didn't seem right that he's so far up there. And you know that going to the Eagles was good for him. You do. Of course you do. Even though they're a run-first offense with a mobile quarterback who is just as likely to score the touchdown as pass it.
Yeah.
But everyone was so sure it was positive. And then here he is, wide receiver 6 or 7. You go, so it was. But then once you dive into it and you go, oh, wow, actually, that's really flammable. It's really flammable. So I think while I actually have somehow in 12 leagues 0 shares of AJ Brown, I implore everybody who's succeeding with AJ Brown, please do the right thing now because it is about to get fucking horrible. There is a tornado about to come through and rip 6 out of the next 10 weeks apart.
I have 1 share of AJ Brown, and it's in that Champions League, and he was on the waivers just to talk about how, how many people are available in that league. So
that's a tough league to trade into, by the way.
If there hasn't been one, even a league that I'm in, there hasn't been one trade all year. Because
man, I worked hard to try and make trades happen in that league when I was in it too.
It's too easy to set a lineup. Like, it's just too, even though we're deep and we're setting 2 quarterbacks and 3 running backs and 3 wide receivers and a flex and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's still so easy to set a team in a 16 league. There's just always someone you can find. Again, just to prove the fact is that AJ Brown was on the waivers.
Do you do this, dude? Do you look down the waivers in that league and just go, oh, wow, I can't believe that guy's available. I'll add him. And then you hit add, and then you go to your lineup and you go, I don't like him more than everyone I've got.
That's exactly what happened with him last week. I've spent $15 or something at Fab on him. I'm like, oh shit, this is AJ Brown. I've got to get him in. Like, I'll go, a decent Fab dump, and then I'm like, I'm not even going to start this guy.
Yeah, where do I even fit him? Yeah, who did you have to drop too? Because you're like,
I think I still had Cortland. I think I still had Cortland Sutton in my team, so that was a pretty easy decision. But I can
understand why you might wrestle with that because it's not like Cortland Sutton's nobody.
No, but I just feel like the way AJ Brown's playing was a no-brainer. But yeah, again, I've got no issue if you're saying it because, like I said, he just always seems like someone that could be traded for or could be traded away. It's just the way he is.
I just can't believe how fragile his whole season was by the time I looked at it. I'm just like, wow. It's kind of like when you see the big facade of the London streetscape on a TV show, but we all know it's just a set. And there's nothing fucking behind it. And I kind of feel like that's AJ Brown. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem like it should be that shallow. That's all. I was just surprised.
I feel like there's always someone ready to go studs up, slide tackle, and just take out his knee. It's just the way he seems.
Yeah, true. Well, hopefully this has been a segment that has helped some people.
I hope so.
I love doing this segment too because it does force you to look really hard and think really strategically about where you are in leagues, what you would be wanting to do, how you would maneuver a guy out if you line up, how you maneuver a guy in. So, and again, just really grateful that we've got a brain like yours with us to do it, because it's just that's what you do, and you're so brilliant at it when it comes to the salary cap leagues and the draft leagues for the predominant sport in the part of the country that we live in through wintertime, and the way you play fantasy for that. And that so much of that's transferable to this kind of strategy. We're just really, really lucky to have someone like your brain on our show to impart that knowledge. So thank you, brother.
No problem, mate. And like I said, I do this just for my absolute love of it. And if anyone takes 1% good out of this, then I've done my job. I just hope anyone just hears this. They don't have to do exactly what I'm saying, or don't have to take all the advice I'm giving. But if they can just hear a little bit of it and it helps them in the trade moving forward, then I'll be happy. So I hope everyone out there just got something out of this.
I like that it also kind of polarizes us sometimes too, where you're like, fucking Melvin Gordon. And I'm like, no, believe in Christian Kirk. And I kind of think it gives us opportunities maybe in the next week or two to be like, well, let's formalize that hatred. So you may hear more about some of these. I hope you didn't notice this too subtly too, but I've kind of had this little guy sitting in the frame for most of it, just to let you know who won starts of the week this week, and he's edging his way towards staying down this way. He's not staying for long. You're in town too. I'm going to leave this in my mailbox. You come pick it up.
Yeah, Matty's on a full high this week.
Yeah, 100%. All right, mate. Look, we better get Manjot in here for start of the week. But thank you for doing this segment with me. It's always so valuable.
Absolutely, mate. Adios.
Adios.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
But we've established right on now that I probably need to retire from hosting, hand that job to Manjot, and then I need to ask really nicely if I'm allowed on his show.
It was this is me. This isn't me shitting on Taylor for not starting Dion Johnson.
I feel like I somehow start talking before you even introduce me about something. But
look, Matt, if you have a briefcase somewhere,
op shop, 100%. I can get one from an op shop for like $10.
And like I said, apparently the Gulls just decide to have sex around me. Apparently it's the brothel around my car.
I wonder if now every Coles car park Taylor goes into, he's going to have that moment where he just gets transported back to Coffs Harbour.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
Yeah, I ate that shit for breakfast, all that pressure. So
he's going to have an absolute field day going through this.